National Report Court is back in session. The New York City bodega clerk who had murder charges dropped after video showed he acted in self-defense is now suing District Attorney Alvin Bragg and the NYPD for civil rights violations.
Yeah, that was Jose Alba, was attacked behind the counter, you see on surveillance, in July of 2022 by a 35-year-old Austin Simon and his girlfriend Tina Lee. Now Alba's filing a lawsuit alleging he was wrongfully prosecuted because of the Manhattan DA's racial equity policies. We're taking up the case today for National Report Court today with Amanda Makki. She's a lawyer and Republican strategist. Ameer Benno is here, a constitutional law attorney, Newsmax contributor. So, for the purposes of today's segment, Amanda, if you don't mind representing the bodega worker, Jose Alba, Ameer, you will have the wonderful pleasure of representing DA Alvin Bragg and the NYPD. Thank you for being professional, too. We appreciate that. So we'll start with this. According to the New York Post, the lawsuit states this, quote, "While in theory Bragg's racial equity policies are a well-intentioned attempt by him to implement even-handed justice, the means and methods employed by Bragg have instead had an opposite effect and resulted in discrimination against certain defendants based on race." Amanda, talk to us about the bodega worker and how strong of a case is here.
He has a very strong case. I mean, you know, racial justice is what the pursuit of Alvin Bragg has been this whole time. And so this is why truly you see people leaving the state of New York, because if someone can't act in self-defense, if someone can't defend themselves against a known convict, then what's going to happen? You're going to have people thrown into Rikers, as Mr. Alba was, for 6 days, and that's the premise of this lawsuit. One of the most dangerous, vile jails in America, because he acted in self-defense. So I think there absolutely is a case. Furthermore, you have even the mayor in agreement with why was he even prosecuted in the first place, as was the New York Police Department former chief, who sided with Mr. Alba.
There were a lot of questions being asked at a national level about the decisions by DA Bragg to bring these charges against Jose Alba. Ameer, New York City's law department said the city will review the case when it's served and actually respond accordingly. But what would be the defense in this case?
All right. Well, you're putting me in a tough position, but here's what the defenses would likely be. One is there may very well been ultimately the determination that Jose Alba didn't do anything wrong and therefore should not have been prosecuted. But that couldn't have been made sort of split second at the moment that he was arrested, or even at the moment he was arraigned and they decided to prosecute him. Self-defense obviously is a very factual, intensive question. And the question here is, remember, New York has no stand your ground law. So there's a duty to retreat. Did he retreat? Did he continue to use deadly force once the threat was neutralized? Those are questions of fact that maybe just weren't really readily visible at the outset. Second, prosecutors have a lot of discretion to make prosecutorial decisions, and they should do so without having to feel threatened by lawsuits right over their shoulders. So they're given a very broad immunity. So that's the second defense, is the immunity. And then the third argument is, insofar as there's a racial component of this, that there was some policy or practice, well, you're going to have to prove that the prosecution of Alba was connected to some sort of racial policy and not based on those other factors that I outlined earlier.
Yeah, also this too, Amanda, wanted to bring this in, and you touched on it. After Alba was charged with second-degree murder, there was a $500,000 bail, by the way, and not able to pay it, shipped off to Rikers, very dangerous place to be, jail, prison, notorious. And this, again, is what the lawsuit says that he endured when he was there. Alba was unable to afford the eye-watering bail fee, was shipped off to Rikers, where he endured inhumane and unconstitutional conditions, again, according to the suit. So that's dumped in there too, Amanda. How does that play?
Well, I mean, you're taking him to one of the most notorious jails in America. Really, it doesn't fit the crime. What he did was act in self-defense. And to Ameer's point about retreat, it doesn't seem like in that 4x4 space that that Mr. Simon entered into to start attacking Mr. Alba, that he had a way to retreat. He had a place to retreat. So really, again, you're going back to someone who works in a business trying to protect themselves as a store clerk, and yet he's getting prosecuted. Again, this is why you have the drain out of New York. People don't want to live in a place where they're going to be prosecuted for trying to act in self-defense.
Amir, do you think that the district attorney will have to answer questions as to why other criminals who commit crimes, maybe in some cases on camera, will be let go the following day without having to pay bail? And we saw that play out, and clearly it was a much different situation for the bodega clerk. Why was it different in this case?
Well, that's really the heart of the claim that the city has an unconstitutional policy that was, well, Alvin Bragg created this policy of really getting racial equity and saying, look, we're going to prosecute certain offenders, but not other offenders, irrespective of the facts on the ground. And so I do think it's part of this case. He will probably, whether he has to answer them in a deposition under oath is a question mark. But I think generally speaking, his attorneys are going to have to address a whole variety of cases, many of which are outlined in the complaint, as to why people of a particular race were being prosecuted, but people of another race are not being prosecuted, even though there's evidence that they committed crimes. So, yeah, I do think it's something they're going to have to address.
Yeah. All right, because that was one of our questions when we were watching the case unfold in real time. Amanda and Amir, stay with us. Wanted to welcome in now former federal prosecutor Doug Burns. He's been listening in, here to play judge and jury. Doug, where do you land on this case?
This case was handled just beyond abominably. Amir makes a very good point, though, which is that when somebody kills somebody, they often don't make the determination that it was in self-defense until a little farther down the road. However, even the most minimal analysis up front, quickly, immediately would have determined that this was a clear self-defense fact pattern. So I am going to rule for the plaintiff.
Okay, there we go. Amanda, Doug, and Amir, thank you all for joining us today. Of course, we'll watch how this plays out in the actual court of law. But for now, National Report Court is adjourned. Thank you very much.